Hello everybody and welcome to this panel as part of Out of Focus Digital Conference hosted by Focus Wales. The topic we're going to be discussing today is going worldwide on the web. What effect will Brexit and the pandemic have on exporting music, and what can we do to prepare? I'm Tom Sweet from the British Council Music team, and I'll be chairing this conversation. And I'd like to welcome our panel guests. First, we've got Lisa Whittock from Active Events based in Ayrshire in Scotland. We've got Eluned Haff from Wales Arts International based in Cardiff, Wales. We've got Matt Covey from Tammisdad based in Brooklyn, New York. And last but by no means least, Andy Jones, one of our hosts from Focus Wales. So, as you all know, the coronavirus pandemic has taken over everyone's thinking. Everyone's trying to keep their profile high while travel and performance is impossible. The ability to tour isn't there. This has meant a pretty swift pivot to digital showcasing. So I'd like to kick off with each of you just telling us briefly what it is you do and a bit about how you've been adapting to continue your work during the pandemic. Lisa, would you like to kick us off, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's two parts to what we do. One is Active Events, which is a commercial music agency, and we represent a number of different artists. And the other part of what we do is we run Showcase Scotland Expo, which is the export agency for folk, world roots and acoustic music. As far as the agency is concerned, we've been working closely with some of the artists about online monetized digital content, not free content. And in terms of Showcase Scotland Expo, we've done a number of things. We delivered a virtual visit in May, which is one of our bespoke trade missions. We have delivered Postcards from Scotland, which is 18 Scottish artists being broadcast across 11 countries, 11 festivals in 11 countries across the world. And we have just today, or yesterday, launched Global Music Match, which myself, Sounds Australia and the ECMAs in Canada launched or came up with the idea of in early April, but which also includes Focus Wales. So we've launched that yesterday, and that involves 96 musicians across 14 different countries, introducing each other digitally to each of their markets. So been a bit busy, really.
I'll come back to you to talk on detail on some more of those in a bit. Eluned, where are you at? Where's things with you in Wales Arts International?
Helo, dwi am siarad Cymraeg, felly gobeithio bod chi'n gallu clywed fi. Reit, diolch yn fawr Tom, a falch iawn o gael bod yn rhan o'r drafodaeth yma. Diolch i'r tîm yn Focus Wales. Fel pawb arall, mi ddath y newid fel storm yn mis Mawrth ni. Oedden ni ar y pryd allan yn Elin yn rhan o Wythnos Cymru yn dathlu rhwng Gwyl Ddewi a Gwyl St Patrick. A yn fesul un oedd pob peth oedd y brics i gyd yn cwmpo. O'r wythnos cynt oedd yna lot wedi digwydd o gwmpas bod South by Southwest wedi cael ei dynnu lawr a cael pawb i beidio teithio'n saff, cefnogi tîm Focus Wales, oedd fel arfer yn arwain ar ran Cymru allan yna, ond hefyd holl artistiaid eraill oedd yn gweithio ledled y byd. Ac wedyn wrth gwrs ers hynny bod yn rhan o'r tîm mewnol yng Nghyngor Cynnal Celfyddydau Cymru i fod yn edrych ar ariannu bris, ariannu resilience, ac hefyd edrych ar ein hariannu ni'n hunan o ran yn gwaith rhyngwladol ni, sydd ar ei ar hyn o bryd. Mae'r rhan fwyaf o'r gweithgareddau dyn ni'n ymwneud efo nhw, neu wedi newid yn llwyr neu wedi suspendio dros dro. Dwi'n meddwl un o'r pethau sydd wedi bod yn bwysicach i ni, fel nid yn unig fel asiantaeth, ond hefyd yn cefnogi'r artistiaid yng Nghymru yn wneud yn rhyngwladol, ydy sicrhau yn bod ni'n dal yn fyw o fewn rhwydweithiau rhyngwladol ac yn dysgu lot o beth sy'n mynd ymlaen fesul munud, newydd o dod drafodaethau efo Gwyl Caredin rwan, lle oedd artistiaid o Werddon, o Fishamble yn trafod ynglyn â y gwaith o fod yn lleol ac yn rhyngwladol yr un pryd a sut mae edrych i fewn arna ni'n hunan yn gallu'n helpu ni weld sut mae'r byd yma yng Nghymru, ond sut da ni'n ymwneud efo'r byd yn ehangach. Ond dwi'n meddwl ar un peth sydd dal yn her anferth i ni fama, fel ym mhobman arall, ydy sut mae'r byw yn dod yn ôl i fewn i'n bywydau ni. A dydy'n bywydau ni ddim yn mynd i fod rhywun peth heb y byw yn efo, felly mae hwnna'n dal yn her anferth i ni. Mae'r ochr ddigidol yn prysur dyfu, a mae yna lot o waith diddorol iawn yn mynd yn ei flaen, ac mae'r gwaith mae Lisa, Focus Wales a pawb a Matt a pawb yn rhan o'r drafodaeth yma yn wneud yn codi calon rhywun yn fawr, ond mae'r byw angen dod yn ôl ar ryw bwynt yn iawn hefyd, felly dwi'n edrych ymlaen i glywed a thrafod hyn.
Great, yeah, I think we're all very much looking forward to the live coming back as much as is possible. Matt, can you give us an update how things are in America, please?
Oh, they're grim. I guess Thomasdat's an organization that works to help facilitate cultural exchange internationally. And we've worked a lot with Arts Council of Wales and Welsh Arts International over the years. So it's very exciting for me to have a chance to join you all here today. So thanks for that, Focus Wales. I'd rather be there. I'd rather be on my way to Wrexham right now, but alas, such is not the case this year. So our time is really spent between two things. Thomasdat provides a lot of pro bono legal assistance to artists and arts organizations addressing issues about how to manage the US immigration system for getting artists into the US. Obviously, with no performances happening and nobody going anywhere, we've pivoted very quickly to using that to focusing not on immigration expertise, but on streaming and royalties and intellectual property issues. So while the amount of immigration work we're doing has dropped significantly, we're now working with lots and lots of artists and arts organizations in the US, helping them understand the legalities of moving their work online. It's both been work with US entities, but also with international artists who are bringing their streams to the US and trying to figure out how to do that legally, how to do it without getting in trouble, how to not infringe on other artists' rights. So that's one thing. We've continued to do the work with Welsh Arts International and the other arts councils of the United Kingdom toward preparing, despite all this, preparing for that time when live does come back, and then we're posed with the challenges of Brexit, which for the moment aren't really the top concern, but will be the top concern as soon as travel is allowed again, and trying to help create a structure for dealing with mobility issues once mobility comes back. And then honestly, probably the largest piece of our time is spent dealing with something you folks aren't having to deal with directly, and that's trying to navigate the vagaries of the US government and how it's affecting international artists who are in the US. So we're spending an enormous amount of time helping artists figure out how to deal with the sort of rolling thunderstorm of catastrophes that comes out of the US government. In regards to how foreigners are treated in the US, or foreigners who are needing to get into the US are treated. That's what we're up to. It's all fun.
Thank you, Matt. And yes, that's a very valid point you make about Brexit sort of having slightly disappeared from view at the moment. We'll come to that soon. And Andy, can you give us an overview from your side, please?
Yeah, so yeah, it's been a very busy year. I imagine just the same as it's been for everybody, really. When lockdown came, it was all within a few days, wasn't it, of South by Southwest being cancelled. And from that point onwards, really, it's been full on for us. I mean, we had 7 artists from Wales going to Austin to showcase at South by Southwest. So initially, we spent those first few days working with those artists to untangle that situation, see where and how we could help with artists who maybe they'd booked their flights and their hotels, and just trying to sort of, as I say, help them navigate out of that situation, although some are still trying to sort all of that out. That was quite messy for a lot of people. And then pretty much immediately we had to postpone Focus Wales. We've since had to postpone Focus Wales again. So we've postponed our festival's 10th edition, originally planned for May. We then pushed it on to October while we were sort of surveying how things developed. And as the months went on, we just realised it was unfeasible to look at doing something this year. So we've now kicked the event on to October 2021, which we think gives us the best fighting chance of being able to deliver the event as we would like to. Alongside that, we've been exploring what we can do digitally, both in terms of supporting artists at a grassroots level within Wales, who maybe aren't sort of the export ready batch of artists who are just coming through, perhaps would have been playing their first ever Focus Wales this year. You know, what can we do to help those artists? And Out of Focus was born from that sort of thinking, really. What can we do right now to basically help firm up some plans for our artists? I think the music community needs a bit of hope. You know, we need to put the defibrillators on our Welsh music community right now, because everybody feels a little bit lost with everything that's going on. But it's, you know, I guess it's not too dissimilar to how everybody's feeling everywhere. You know, the sort of opportunities obviously for live has just come to a full stop. But there is a lot that we can do. So we wanted to put together this event to connect our artists with industry, so that they could see, actually, no, there is plenty that you can be doing right now. There's plenty of support out there. I say there's lots artists can be doing. So hopefully throughout a Focus, we will be offering some hope and guidance to the artists that we have in Wales. Alongside that, we're looking at what we can do internationally. So, you know, year-round Focus Wales, we're taking artists showcase at different events around the world. So, you know, what I think by the time we got to April, and obviously I think there was that initial shock of the pandemic hitting and everything coming to a full stop, everything being cancelled. By the time we got to April, you know, we suddenly started to think, well, actually, there probably is quite a lot we could do with our international partners online, by way of creating opportunities to engage international industry, connect international industry with our artists, and vice versa, and international artists with our industry here, just to keep those relationships going. Possibly act as a precursor to taking artists to key events next year. So we're working with partners in Austria, so we're showcasing artists as part of the Digital Waves Vienna. We're working with our Canadian partners. We're working with partners in China, Korea, Australia, India. Quite a long list, really. I think, you know, as the weeks have got on, I mean, certainly in the last couple of months, it feels like it's accelerated a lot. It would appear there's a lot that we can do digitally, which I think is quite exciting. As Lisa has mentioned, you know, we've got Global Music Match, which is something that Lisa and colleagues sort of created, and Focus Wales really pleased to be able to join in on. I think that's a really exciting opportunity to match up compatible artists worldwide as part of almost a musical pen pal system, a way of sharing audiences and sharing their experiences. And, you know, who knows what will be born of that long term. There's quite a lot going on, so forgive me if I'm rambling, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of where we're up to.
No, that's good. That sounds like you've got lots going on. It all sounds like you're all keeping busy, which I'm really pleased to hear. And you've all mentioned that you've been doing quite a lot of work pivoting into the digital domain. I mean, lucky technology allows us this. One thing I'm interested to know is, how easy did you find it to take your audiences with you from live face-to-face environments, which is what most of us, less so Matt, I suppose, are used to operating in, to moving it all online? Did your fans come with you? Did you have to work extra hard to bring people from the sector? Tell me a bit about how it worked. Lisa, do you want to give us maybe with the example of the Showcase Scotland Expo?
Yeah, the visit was, I mean, very much like what Neil's described. The visit was due to take place at a physical event in May, and we actually took the decision very early on, and we took the decision in mid-March to cancel that and to start working to take that on to being an online event. And as I said, it's a bespoke inward trade mission, which has historically had a massive return on investment. I mean, literally, the figures are astounding, 349% return on investment from that particular event. And to give you an example of how it works, in 2018, we had 30 agents, festivals, and venues and promoters over from Australia and New Zealand into Scotland over 4 days, looking at Scottish artists. And there are 21 artists that showcase. 7 of them got agency deals, which is actually our normal number that get agency deals. So 7 of them got agency deals, but to our utter amazement, the festivals in particular said, look, we've decided that we've seen so much talent and we can't present it, we can't sign everything. So we want to organise a Year of Scotland in Australia in 2020. So there was a whole year, over 350 shows planned with our tourist board involved, the Scottish Government, Creative Scotland, everyone, and a number of artists that were due to go and participate during that. So luckily most of that happened, but actually, Neil, similarly to you, we had a lot of artists stranded in Australia and we had to get them home like at really short notice. But it was so successful. There are only 30 delegates that attend each visit. So we were due to focus on Northern Europe in May. And so we decided that we would take it online and still run it for the 4 days, but expand that out to all of the previous delegates that had attended. And it was very, very simple. We used old footage that the artists had, archival footage of live performances, and got them to record a new introduction, a live intro, and it was all edited together into 4-hour-long programs. And then we used WhatsApp, and we had all the artists and all the delegates on WhatsApp interacting while everyone was watching it at the same time across the world, everyone apart from the Australians, like the time zones didn't work for them. And so we didn't just take our audience with us, we had 125 delegates attending, whereas normally we would usually have 30. And that was interesting, but it was really early on to do it. So I think in terms of taking audiences with you, you're always going to have to look for new models and new ways of doing things, because there's a lot more stuff that's happening online. But certainly Postcards from Scotland was intense. I mean, we had 78 artists apply for 18 positions, and what we did there was we had the 11 artistic directors. I mean, these festivals were like the Cambridge Folk Festival, Lorient in France, Tonder in Germany, in Denmark, Rudolstadt in Germany. They were big festivals, Philadelphia Folk Festival in the US. So we had them come on board as panelists, essentially. And those 11 artistic directors we whittled the 70 odd applications down to 30, but those artistic directors then had to choose the final 18 from those 30. So they were seeing like artists that some of them hadn't already seen. So in itself, it was a mini showcase. And actually the results of that weren't just, the program. We then did another program, and that's gone out called Postcards from Scotland, and it's being streamed as we speak right until the end of October, actually, across those festivals. But in addition to that happening, those festival directors, as I say, also saw artists that they hadn't previously seen. We'd never done that before. We'd never had an international selection panel for any of our showcases. And so even the artists who weren't selected have benefited, because a lot of the artistic directors have said, oh, quite fancy like looking at them for future projects. So that's been really useful. Global Music Match, I think, is going to be huge. I mean, all you need to do is look at the social media activity that's going on. If you just, hashtag Global Music Match, and it's like, it's everywhere. And we've only been running for 2 days. And we're already talking about, I think the interesting thing about that is in terms of audiences, which was your question, is that we're accessing audiences in a very different way. You would previously take an artist to Folk Alliance or South by Southwest or wherever you would take them to do a showcase to the industry. But the ultimate goal of that is to build new audiences and fans by getting them in front of live audiences. So Global Music Match kind of like cuts out that element, and it's artist to artist led, accessing new audiences as we speak. And I think the thing that's really exciting about that is that it's not COVID specific. it was born out of COVID and the need to connect artists, but it will continue, and it's our intention. In fact, I had a conversation today. I must call you later, Neil. I had a conversation today with one country who's not part of that, and they were like, "Oh my God, like I can't believe we've missed out on this. We really want to be part of the next pilot, so we're the next edition." So we're already talking about doing Global Music Match #2. So there's a lot of good things, but I think in terms of taking your audience with you, you need to, the challenge is that we need to continually reinvent the wheel. And I will say this to you, right? I am working harder than we have ever worked in our lives. Our staff are furloughed. We still have an agency where we're rebooking all of our live tours, and we're now running all of these digital projects in a new way and having to learn new tools with a lot less staff available to us. So it's challenging, but it's also really successful. I think so far it's been successful. So that's encouraging to all the artists that are listening. The one thing I just would like to add to that, to the artists, is it's important when you're thinking about doing digital content that you're appealing to your own audience. So have a look at the Global Music Match stuff and look at the way that those artists are talking to their own social media audiences about other artists, because they're still talking to their own audience, and that's really important. But secondly, really think about free content. I mean, we are, as an agent, we have kind of advised none of our artists to do free content at all. It needs to be paid for content, because this could be going on for quite a while.
Thank you, Lisa. Andy, could you share a bit about what you're doing to continue to engage with your audience as you make the shift, hopefully temporary shift away from live?
Yeah, well, we got a couple of we're spinning a couple of plates at the minute, because we're looking at the more industry focused work that we do, and I've got to sort of give credit to Le Bureau Export for the inspiration for an element of the Out of Focus conference that we're delivering this year, which is a non-public facing element of it, where we are matching up artists with compatible industry. I took part in a Le Bureau Export session in May, which was, I guess, an attempt on their part to, it was organised by the Le Bureau Export UK office, and it was to replace almost the experience of taking the Made in France artists to the Great Escape. So they did a whole fun thing about, this is like digital Brighton, and if we were in Brighton right now, we'd potentially go and get some fish and chips from here, and they had interesting backdrops, and they made it fun. But ultimately, there were something like 8 artists involved, 8 delegates. As I said, it wasn't about generating public audience, but they thought really carefully about matching up these delegates and artists, because in their judgment, they're good matchups, and they could potentially end up working together. And the proof's in the pudding, really, because I was invited as a delegate, and a couple of bands I want to book, a couple of the industry I had meetings with, we want to bring over as delegates to Focus Wales when we're back up and running next October. And it was really high impact. And that was just one session that lasted something like an hour 15. We're going to be running 6 of these sessions during Focus Wales for 36 Welsh artists who've applied to us as part of an open call. And I'm really excited about it, to be honest. We've managed to assemble a sort of a really good roster of industry for it. And as I say, really compatible with the artists in each group. And it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. It's hard to talk about results just yet, because it's still early days from our experience. Out of Focus is just getting up and running. But so far, I mean, certainly in terms of engaging with our audience online and promoting all of this activity, we've seen a lot of online engagement across our socials. There's been a lot of support for this particular project. And equally with the other projects that we've been doing. So, we've partnered with Wide Days up in Scotland, and we had a couple of artists showcase where we would have been taken two bands up to Edinburgh to showcase. We showcased 2 artists digitally. So we had the bands Adwaith and Campfire Social, performing from a studio in Wrexham, and that was great. The sort of interaction that the artists has seemingly had across their socials, it definitely raised awareness of those artists to an audience that Wide Days had brought together. So that gave us a little bit of a snapshot of what could be achieved on a bigger scale, I think. You know, if we're just looking at 2 Welsh artists there, how about we take 36 Welsh artists across Out of Focus and see what we can create for them as part of our own event. But as I say, I mean, the Out of Focus concept really is about that direct industry engagement more so than building an audience. So we've been very careful to say, no, the whole point of this is about that industry connection. So alongside that, we're also looking at a new event that I can't announce just yet, which will, well, you know, it might seem a bit, I don't know, it might seem a bit overconfident, but we're talking about it like it's going to be a national moment for Wales. It's going to be a partnership between 4 Welsh festivals, involve lots of artists. It'll be Wales-wide, and this is something that we hope will be being broadcast across a long weekend in November, as things stand. But that's the thing we're looking to do, using various platforms, TV, radio, online, and that's the thing that we'll be doing to try and help grow awareness and audiences for our emerging artists in Wales. So yeah, it's kind of 3-pronged. On a Welsh level, we've got those 2 elements, and as I say, alongside that, we've got the international stuff. We've done a partnership with Waves Vienna, which is really exciting, but many of the other projects that we're looking at with China, with Korea, with New Colossus actually in the US, and a number of other organizations. Did I say Canada? Australian Music Week is another one that we're going to be partnering with. All of those specifics are still to be announced, but I'm really excited about them. And just taking the early things that we've done, I mean, with Wide Days, for example, I think it gives me a lot of optimism for what we'll be able to achieve with those projects. But yeah, time will tell. It's such an interesting moment, really, because I think getting beyond the initial shock and chaos of all of this, I think we have all begun to realize that there are a lot of opportunities online to do work like we're now planning to do, and we could have always been doing work like this, and it doesn't need to just be reactionary and stuff that we're just doing in this moment. It's not just about this bridging phase, you know. These projects that we're getting going now, you know, are projects that we would hope would live alongside our usual work going forward, when hopefully we get to safer, more sort of normal times, which is obviously what we're all hoping for.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I mean, again, both you and Lisa have just spoke of all the new stuff you're doing, and it does sound like you are incredibly busy, and I'm not surprised tired. I'll just sort of stay in this area, but move on a bit. Monetization, which I'm sure is something on everybody's lips. Lisa, you mentioned that you do not advise any of your artists to do content for free. How's it been going trying to monetize things? Has it been successful? Can you talk a little about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm in the process of developing 2 projects right now, right, for 2 of our own rosters. So they've not taken place, but they've been in the planning stages for, you know, a good 2 to 3 months, so it's too early to say whether or not they're gonna make some money from their actual streams. One's a tour and the other's a live stream for 2 different bands. One of whom was supposed to be at Focus Wales, actually, Elephant Sessions. So so it's a bit early, but I think in terms of the for us, it's all in the planning. I think it's really easy just to stick something up there, right? And it's out on YouTube, or it's out in Facebook Live or whatever. And it's not necessarily brilliant quality. And it's certainly, you know, kind of not really doing anything. I think, you know, it's tempting, and I understand it for musicians that, you know, they need an income. But I think that, you know, it has to be of a certain quality where you're taking your fans with you. And it has to be monetized properly with password protected technology, etc., which is not that hard to do. I mean, we have done some monetization of postcards from Scotland, which is interesting, because that's gone out, as I said, it's engaged building audiences, it's going out across those 11 festivals, and there is a donate box. That has made money. It's only gone out over 4, I think it's actually 12 festivals. I keep saying 11, but I'm pretty sure it's 12. Gone out of 4 over 4 of those festivals. And it's not been huge, I have to say. It's only so far raised about £4,000 for the artists. And we've got 71 musicians involved in that. So that's not going to go very far. But we've got plans to change that. We're talking with the festivals that are due to stream, and also we're going to do a collective restream now where we're targeting all of the artists' resources. We learned a lot from doing that, actually. I think we encouraged the artists not to promote across their social channels, and the reason for that was that it's running, it started in July and it's finishing in October, so there needed to be an element of exclusivity for all of the festivals that were presenting it to their audiences. It's not on YouTube, you can't see it on YouTube, etc. But we are going to change that, and we're going to do a massive drive to monetize it. So I think it's been mixed, but certainly I know that some musicians who've done monetizing, I mean, one of the early English folk festivals did incredibly well, where it was all solo musicians and they raised £90,000, which is a huge amount of money. But it was all solo artists, and for the most bands are bands, they're not solo musicians, so it's not possible for them to do that kind of thing. So and some, as I say, have been not successful at all. But for us and our roster, speaking as an agent now, for our roster, it's important that we have that planning. We're engaging with the right press agents, the right social media agents. The stream is of exceptionally high quality. We have been fortunate in that Creative Scotland funded both of these pieces of activity that we're about to deliver. We could not have done it without Creative Scotland funding. That costs far too much money. That's the thing that I think people fail to understand, is that to do any decent level of high quality stream, you're talking at least 10,000 quid. I mean, it's not cheap, right, to do a high quality recorded stream. So Arts Councils, beware.
Yeah, that's something I've been hearing a lot lately, is the cost for the level of production that people expect. They expect a sort of a Netflix quality production, but don't necessarily understand.
Actually, just to jump in there, one thing, because there is something else that we did in Global Music Match which didn't cost a fortune, and I don't know if you have this in Wales, but there's a facility called Capture Works, which has just been set up in Glasgow, and it's got 5 cameras on gobos and a good mixing facility. And we put all of the Global Music Match artists in there to record an hour's worth of footage. We're paying for the edit of 3 tracks, which can then be used for Global Music Match, but it's giving them another 45 minutes worth of material that they can then stream, which is high quality. So we've done that through Global Music Match. So if there's a facility like that, we got it much cheaper because we were putting in 12 artists over 4 days. So that's how we did it.
Yeah, I believe there's that's great, Lisa. I think that there are options across Wales, but I know Neuadd Ogwen and Bethesda are actually teching up the venues to enable them to do high quality live streaming from there. So there are a few opportunities. I think it's one of the biggest challenges right now is, we're seeing, some artists are willing to travel, some artists are still, we're seeing like some artists who are just still, lacking in that confidence to travel, to get together and rehearse. It's funny because you get some artists who are just like, they just don't care or whatever. Or they're just like, yeah, I'm not really bothered. Yeah, we'll go and rehearse. We'll go and do a gig, get us on the road if we're allowed to. And then others, as I say, are a little bit sort of still in shock. I mean, UK government did a great job of scaring people with this. And perhaps some of it was distorted. I don't know. It's a can of worms, isn't it, really? But from my experience of trying to get artists into the studio, as I say, it was a mixed experience so far. Some of them were happy to jump in a van. some of them are probably still a couple of months off being confident enough to rehearse together. So that's definitely one of the challenges we have to overcome. But through our broadcast event, we're looking to sort of generate that sort of high quality, broadcast quality content for the artists. So I think, as you highlight, Lisa, it's really important that artists have this. Every time we're showcasing artists or we're working with artists to get their applications together to go and showcase at key events around the world, quite often they're lacking that high quality, that live filmed footage. And we stress to them, look, if you're going to apply without putting this together, putting the effort in to have it, then a booker, well, they might just ignore you. Myself, I'd go searching for the live footage and I'll end up finding the really dodgy pub footage of the band playing, and that's a poor reflection of that artist. So I think this has made a lot of artists sort of think, well, we need to pull our socks up, and maybe we need to look at our YouTube channel that we set up and never did anything with. All of a sudden, artists and managers are looking at those platforms and thinking, right, it is about time we sort this out. And I think monetizing it, I think as you highlight, really, it has to be high quality to be able to do it, because everybody can go live on Facebook from their bedroom with an acoustic guitar. But if you're wanting people to part with money for that, well, I think you're going to struggle. I think you need to be a bit more creative and inventive.
Yeah, I'd agree. Matt, could I bring you in to touch on this, because you're saying that you pivoted a lot of your work towards streaming and royalties and things. Tell us your experience, where the successes have been, where the learnings have been.
Okay, although, Elena, did you have something you wanted to put in there?
No, carry on.
Andy.
I'll come back in after.
All right. I saw the finger go up. I think that I don't know if this is a US perspective and things are going better on the monetization front in the UK than they are here, but I'm definitely seeing people struggling with this idea here. And I haven't seen, there have been a number of models that seem to have worked, but they're usually driven by the existing fan base and existing fame of the artists, rather than it's harder to see an artist who wouldn't draw many people finding a way to monetize a live stream. It's just, I'm not seeing that happening much. I'm interested in, obviously, the larger format events that draw people who are willing to pay for the event, and then they experience the artists who are there. I had a great time going to the Mutech Festival in San Francisco a couple months back. Didn't know any of the artists, but ended up spending, I paid my ticket and I ended up spending probably 4 or 5 hours wandering from room to room and into this discussion section and into this movie clip thing. So that was a really interesting experience, and it felt sort of like the digital version of going to like Talkless in Berlin back in the 90s, where it's like it's all crumbling and none of it really works that well, but it's kind of awesome anyway. So there's been things like that that I think have been working, and I think when you step outside of music, there have been some really interesting models that have been cropping up in the performing arts, that I think especially theater, and again, I know we're talking about music here, but I think that as I see the arts looking to see what each other are doing, there's some really interesting things happening where, especially the theater space, their efforts to kind of think outside the box, break the various walls of performance, and create a live experience, a streaming experience, which is more than just a high tech acoustic guitar from the bedroom. That there's really kind of an interactive element to it. And as we see, I think some of the work that the electronic music has been doing, integrating with gaming, has been amazing. This is mostly stuff I'm finding out from my son, and am not, you know, I'm only saying, wait, what? You're seeing who in, like, you know, you're wandering around in Fortnite to see a band that's real, like that's amazing, and I'll pay money for that. So I think that kind of thing, to me, I think the interaction between gaming and the arts, and also this is going to sound really weird, but I think that we're going to see a period of time. I think I talked to you, Eleanor, about this idea. I think we're going to see a period of time when it's going to sound so stupid, the concept of karaoke, and as we sort of start thinking about how you can take live performance in a live situation in small venues and start linking it to streamed content, where you've got a hybrid performances between, you know, stuff that's streaming in, that's live, that's remote, and local people in a venue. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'm starting to see, you know, again, initially in theater, but I'm starting to see people exploring ways of doing performance that make it somehow vastly more interesting than just, you know, like watching Live Aid on television. Like it's a very different experience, and I think that's I think that's where people are gonna. That's one area where people are gonna be willing to pay money, and we're starting to see that happening.
Yeah, I think it's about coming up with something new, something engaging, isn't it? Eleanor, I'll go to you. Sorry, I missed you before.
Oh, there's so much to say. I don't know where to go, and I'm definitely going to speak in English on this because I'm getting too excited and my mind's going everywhere. So bring me back if I go off too broadly. But, you know, just thinking of that hybrid thing that Matt was talking about, and to me, it's getting the balance for the hybrid right, because I will never be fully satisfied by just digital. And I know people who love the arts need that physicality, that, you know, the sense of well-being that comes with it. And I think we're all rethinking where we fit into not just art forms overlapping, or, you know, my 11-year-old twin boys telling me about we can't go anywhere this Friday because there's something happening on Fortnite, which I had hated until lockdown, and all of a sudden it's come as a lifesaver because they're engaging with their friends, and now they're engaging with their friends in Alaska, and they're doing all this, and I'm thinking this is changing how I'm having to think about my life at home, as well as how I want my kids to interact with the world and with the arts. So they're getting their music through a platform that I never really liked in the first place, which is just bizarre. So, you know, even on a personal level, it's quite mad. But just to dwell a little bit on that point around well-being and the role the music particularly plays in that, and not to undervalue and put value on that, you know, and it's, I struggle with the monetization side of things, both from a, you know, a sort of an employee of the Arts Council, where everything in a way is changing, how we funded things, but also from the point of view, where does that monetization take us? So if we're working internationally, why are we working internationally? Is it just to make money, or is it because we're wanting to also change a little bit of the world that we're living in, or the world that we want to have back at home? And that space, the local and the global, has changed, and we can play our part in changing that. And I think that is a really exciting thing. So, for example, one of the things we've been involved in is the UNESCO Resilient Global Movement, which is a phenomenal movement. And, you know, the discussions that's going on globally, they're the same, if more extreme in some places, like we've heard in Brazil, where people are literally using their poetry for survival techniques, or whether it's for people with learning difficulties in Wales who just want to have a way of talking to people where they literally cannot leave their home because of not being safe to do so. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other from pivoting to this digital. But I wouldn't say that, I mean, the monetization is important, obviously, but I do think as an Arts Council in Wales particularly, we are particularly looking towards putting a value on well-being and on our health, and how we engage with not just our health workers, but how we engage with each other. And I think that's a really interesting thing that's going on here. The arts and health agenda here is huge, and I would really encourage people to think it through. You know, you've got artists like Kelly Lee Owens, who's just releasing her album this week, who's been working with John Cale, and Kelly's a trained nurse, and she's working on, you know, she's got her track lists and out there to help nurses through what they're going through, and how we are working as a community, and how we as a publicly funded institution can make this possible. Because I hear what Lisa's saying, totally, that you need to have the quality there as well. But I also want to bring that, you know, yes, Brexit is looming, and there's a hell of a lot of issues that, you know, it feels like we keep on having to go, oh God, and yes, Brexit is back. But it is there, and it's looming, and we've got to think about how we're going to be ensuring that we're not cutting people off from perceptions point of view. Our, particularly from musicians' point of view, there's a lot of audiences in Europe that we're having to rebuild relationship with, if you like, but also, what's happening politically around the world, where there are places where we traditionally worked in a lot that we will not be able to work there because of different political situations at the moment. So I think, for me, on top of the Brexit and the COVID challenges, what's framing it all, and in a way is sort of more important than both, I would argue, is climate change and Black Lives Matter. So it's how we, it all comes together. And I just think that in Wales, we're really, really lucky that we've got an amazing legislation called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act that sort of brings together the local, the prosperity, the health, together with our global responsibility. And for once, we're all talking about it here, and we're working as a team to think our way through it. And I'm loving that, but I just hope that that spirit is carried forward, and that we really embed it, and that we put our value, we use our values to get us through this period.
Thanks, Sally. I'm hoping we'll have a little bit of time at the end to touch on the environment part you mentioned, but I wanted to, as you mentioned it, wanted to move on to Brexit, because that was the other big part of this topic. And it has, I feel, and I think a lot of people I've spoken to feel, it's sort of dropped off the table a bit, really, which is a concern, because things will all change at the end of 2020 in the UK. So I just wondered, Ellen, could you sort of talk a bit about what are the unknowns, and perhaps more importantly, what are the unknowns still around this, and what are the areas of concern that you have of things that are still not quite resolved, so some key issues?
I mean, I just think that COVID has exaggerated Brexit. And, so some of the issues that we were dealing with before are now huge. So touring, I mean, we don't know when touring is going to emerge after COVID. Nevertheless, talking about new visa rules and how will people be allowed to come into the UK, and will people really want to come into the UK from other countries when they're looking at where else they could be going, and they themselves are re-emerging out of COVID, even if not Brexit. They're going to be looking at the easy places to go to. So if the UK is going to make it difficult for people to come in, it's going to be a hell of a tall ask to get artists to be in our international festivals. I mean, I think we've got an issue around making sure that the diversity and the equality and the whole of the UK's position as, we're trying to convince ourselves and the world that we're global leaders. We're going to have to be pulling our socks up considerably to be able to even keep that sort of image of ourselves by others. I think we're in danger of becoming a little bit arrogant in the world, and I wouldn't be surprised that as the world is pivoting in the world of Black Lives Matter and the rest of it, that there's a bit of a comeuppance coming our way. I think in terms of like practical things, though, responding to all, there's so many blooming sort of what do you call them, inquiries going on at the moment around taxation, around trade, around borders, I mean, I'm bogged down in writing papers about new legislation coming our way. It's frightening. I mean, all of the trade discussions that's going on with all the different countries internationally, none of us really know the details around them. And as they emerge, will there be something that actually can totally undermine how we operate within the arts? It could happen very easily. So I think we're having to keep our eyes on a lot of different things going on. Matt mentioned earlier that we've been working with our partners across the UK to look at setting up an info point service, which will hopefully help to get information shared around the concerns and the challenges that people have in festivals and in events to bring artists into the UK. And Lisa and colleagues have made the point really loud and clear in various conversations I've been at, that we need to have similar facilities for taking artists out of the UK. And I think that is, it's well heard, and it's a really good point. There are info points available in certain countries that have been sister agencies of ours, but they're not specialists in Brexit. None of us are. So it's going to be a long haul, and it's a bumpy ride ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ellen.
Not very heartening.
Matt, you obviously work in a country that, as you've said, does have a fairly complex and not cheap visa entry system. Are there any sort of learning points that you could share to the UK? Do you think from how it works in America?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, I mean, some people who've heard me speak or been in conversations with me before will have heard this, but I think that the thing that concerns me most, or if I were to look back, if I could time machine myself back to 1990 when the current US immigration policies went into place, the thing that we didn't see at the time, which has become the biggest issue, is that as the process becomes difficult and as the rules become more protectionist and more complex, what happens is you start to create a situation where this is going to sound absurd to someone in the UK or certainly anybody in the EU, but where the process of the process of cultural and artist mobility becomes something that you can't do yourself, something that you have to hire a lawyer to do. And when you go from the situation where you're paying, I don't know, 150 quid for a tier 5 visa versus paying 150 quid plus 500 or 1,000 quid to an attorney to sort out that visa for you. That's the situation we're in the US, where everybody talks about how expensive it is to get in the US, but the actual fees are not that expensive. The problem is the process is so expensive that you have to hire, and so complex you have to hire somebody to do it. And I think that's where the really huge barriers to cultural mobility and to cultural exchange start to grow without anybody really noticing them. And I think that's the biggest danger. And I certainly see that coming with the UK in a situation where, as Ellen had said, nobody really knows, what's going to happen, on January 1st, what's going to happen to that show that you've booked with that French artist, that Turkish artist. Do we know? We probably do, but I don't know. And who are you going to pay, and how much are you going to pay them to sort that out? It's a slow, slippery slope toward a situation where it becomes very, very difficult for the arts to be able to afford to function in a system that's really kind of designed more for corporations and the budgets that corporations can afford, and arts organizations tend to not, which leads back to the topic that Ellen had brought up, which has to do with funding. And the one thing that I do think has been positive with this whole experience over the last 6 months is that I feel like professionally I'm surrounded by a lot of really, really intelligent people with amazing ideas who coast most of the time. And what's really been interesting is watching everybody have to stop coasting, think really hard, think outside the box, and come up with really new and innovative ideas. And that's been really exciting to watch all these smart people actually act smart. And I think in a way the pivot to digital is less interesting than the pivot to thinking harder. And that's why I think Black Lives Matter and certainly the issue of climate change come in, because here we are all figuring out how to not go to conferences. Well, but we've been talking in the climate change community, or the people who've been talking about climate change issues, we've been talking about not going to conferences for years, and now suddenly we can't. And it's taken this to get to the point where this is happening on Zoom rather than Wrexham. And that's exciting. I'd rather be in Wrexham, but I do like the fact that I didn't have to fly 8 hours to go to the festival. And I do like what that's done for the environment. And I think that's the exciting part of all this, is the extent to which, as you said, Elined, this confluence, this constellation of global events is really foregrounding stuff that was already there: racial injustice, climate issues. They were already there, and this is just pushing them to the fore in a way which I think is really exciting.
Thanks, Matt. That's really interesting about the lawyers' fees side of things. That wasn't something I was previously aware of. Lisa, quickly, as from an artist agent point of view, could you sort of give us a quick overview of what, if any, you're able to preparations you're able to make for Brexit? Sort of any sort of things you're putting in place, or is it just too early to tell?
It's too early to tell. I mean, we're waiting for the UK government to tell us in October what's going to happen. It's potentially devastating. I mean, Scotland is a tiny country. There's 5 million people here. Wales is the same. You're a small country, and 40% of all cultural organisations' activity takes place in Europe. For our own agency, 70 to 80% annually of our activity takes place outside Scotland, and about 60% of that outside the UK. So it's a concern. The only thing that I would say is this, is that we do tour artists in Australia regularly. We do tour artists in the States regularly. The States less so, because particularly with the new CWA regulations that came in fairly recently, it's becoming more financially preclusive and more difficult, constantly more difficult to tour in the US, whereas Australia has kind of plateaued. So, you know, paying taxes, lodging your taxes, sorting out your visas, you know, sorting out your permits. You don't have carnies in Australia, thankfully. But, you know, doing those other pieces of paperwork is not something that we are unused to doing. So it's not something that we would be unused to doing either for Europe if it was one visa, right? Not if it's a visa for every single country, right, within Europe. If it was one set of taxes, if it was one VAT exchange rate, you know. So that's the complication, is the freedom of movement and the difficulty within once your artist is in Europe. And also, I think the multiple entry issue is of great concern, because, you know, people do tend to go to and from festivals in different countries over a weekend, or they could go from one festival in France to another festival in Belgium in the same weekend. So, and then back to France the following day. So the multiple entries are also a worry and a concern.
Okay, thank you. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to touch briefly on the environment angle that you raised, Eleanor, and bit of an open-ended question to finish on, I suppose, really. Everybody has adapted brilliantly, and I like, Matt, that you picked up that you really enjoyed people thinking cleverly about this, pivoting to new ways of working. I'm not going to say digital, so I don't restrict myself with that. And this helping the environmental issues. Do you think things will stay in place, or do you think the minute everyone can go back to normal, they will? Andy, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a clear cut, we're now back to normal, to be honest. I think it's going to be quite a transition, but I do think the desire to get back to real events with audiences, to feel the sub bass, be in the room with the snare drum is quite a strong desire. People do want that experience. People do want face-to-face networking. However, I think, you know, to echo what Elena said earlier, I do think, you know, this has been a big moment of reflection for everybody, both in terms of, you know how you know, Black Lives Matter is a hugely important movement, and it is, you know, definitely it's provided an opportunity for us all to reflect upon what we're doing and what we could do better at with our events, as far as our, you know, global footprint and our just general activity. It's provided an opportunity to really consider that. As far as exporting artists is concerned goes, though, while I do understand that, you know, we all need to lead by example and do what we can, more often than not, when we take a new artist from Wales to showcase at an event, there's been a number of cases in the last few years. It's been the very first international trip that young artist has ever taken, you know, their very first time on an airplane. So quite often, I don't think those early days showcasing artists are the problem quite. However, as someone who does frequent these international showcase events, you know, there are people who are on aeroplanes every week throughout the year, and I think maybe we all do need to consider the number of flights that we're getting on, and maybe be a bit more selective about the events that we're going to, because yeah, there are some people who could win awards for the amount of events that they go to, and people think I'm busy, but you know, honestly, there are people who go to 3 times as many events as what I do in a year easily. And yeah, I do think we do need to be thinking about that, because as this has demonstrated, you know, we can connect online and there is a lot that we can do. But I think this will be living alongside something like what was normal in 2019 going forward. That's my view anyway.
Thanks, Andy. Eleanor, what about you? What about you? All back to normal, or carry on something different?
I'm going to quote an article that got me thinking right at the beginning, which was Arundhati Roy in the Financial Times in March, when she said, you know, that nothing could be worse than a return to normality, if that's what normality is like. And that had got me thinking right at the beginning, and I don't want that normality back, an unequal normality, a normality where it's okay, where people are not included, you know, a normality where I'm actually costing the earth in the travels that I do. And I do travel a lot. I don't know if I travel more or less than Andy, but I do travel a lot, and I can change that bit. And I do think we've all realised that a lot of what I usually do, even if it's in Cardiff, only half an hour down the road, I don't need to travel there every day. So it's not just about travel internationally, it's about how I use the mixture of technology, of sharing what I know with others in a different way, you know, how you can help and support tastemakers and the important agents and the rest to get our musicians out, and how our musicians can do work in different guises, whether that's in hospital or on theatre stages. And, you know, the return from that will be different, but it could be better.
Great, thank you. Matt, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have much more to add than the last thing I was saying, which is just that there's an excitement that comes with this point in time where things that we've ignored as a society are things that we can't ignore anymore. That's appealing and hopeful in a weird sort of way. I think that's about all I'm able. That's the positive thing I'm able to extract from the moment, I guess. It also highlights the inabilities of some of our social systems and our governments, which have sort of struggled along with their incompetence for years, and now we sort of really realize how deeply that incompetence runs, and that's frightening. That part's the frightening part, but of course it challenges us to do better.
Thank you. And Lisa, final thought on you. How will things look in the future, do you think?
I think that in terms of live performances, I think hybrid is probably here to stay. In terms of exporting and artists performing internationally, actually there is a piece of work that I'm currently doing, which has been funded by Creative Scotland, on corridor touring, because 30 years ago when I set the agency up, we didn't fly to Galicia, right, or Brittany, we drove. Or we got the train, and we actually drove, and you did a show on the way there and a show on the way back, and that helped. You built a corridor towards your festivals, and I think that the cost increases of airlines are going to mean that has to happen, and I think that that's a good thing. I think that, you know, developing corridor touring and thinking about the environment in a more kind of creative way is something that is going to be necessary. And I do think, as I say, that hybrid events are here to stay. In terms of international conferences and events, I kind of already select the ones that I go to. Like, I don't really go to a huge amount, but I do think that this is great. I think this kind of thing I'm really keen to have, because it allows people to brainstorm and connect a lot more regularly and to follow up from face-to-face meetings. But no, I do not want it to replace like face-to-face meetings. Like, you don't get the same spark. You can't have that brilliant idea over a glass of wine in the bar. It doesn't happen. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. We're at the top of our hour. That's really flown by, but so some really interesting thoughts and provocations from all of you. So thanks for bringing your vast wealth of knowledge, and I hope that as times move forward that these new models do start to reap benefits for you. If I just say thank you once again to Lisa Whittock, Ellen Adhaff, Matt Covey and Andy Jones. My name's Tom Sweet. I hope you've enjoyed this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.